Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Christ Church Cathedral. Welcome to Body and Land. I am Miguelina Howell, Dean of Christ Church Cathedral, and so delighted to welcome you to another iteration of Body and Land. Our grand opening was Saturday and Sunday, and today we are featuring Hartford Stage, one of our strongest partners in this community. I'm elated that this project, which is a partnership of Trinity Middletown, Ekklesia Contemporary Ballet, and Christ Church Cathedral, has brought us together to explore eco-justice matters through art. What a gift it is to be in this space and think about creation care through performances and dialogue. I'm particularly thankful that the Reverend Mary Barnett, excuse me, it's not COVID, that the Reverend, it's the allergies, that the Reverend Mary Barnett midwife this project through her heart and creativity, and that Elisa Schroth, the artistic director of Ekklesia Contemporary Ballet, through her leadership, her skills, made this happen. We have been supporting and birthing with her this journey. Excuse me. I'm delighted to see among us Cynthia Ryder, the managing director of Hartford Stage, and virtually, Melia Ben Susan. What a gift to be with you today and with all of you. And I introduce you to Gilda Aliota, who will give us an outline of the program and will introduce the artists. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Aliota, for continuing this conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Howell. It's my privilege to be able to introduce the artists and the program. In a few minutes, we're going to be treated to an excerpt from a play called Living in the Time of Extinction that was written by playwright Miranda Rose Hall and performed by artists from Hartford Stage. Following the play, we will have an opportunity for open dialogue, then followed once again by an outstanding performance of dance, music, and poetry by our guest artists from Ekklesia Contemporary Ballet. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Hartford Stage artists who are with us this evening. First off, I'd like to introduce Zoe Golub-Sass, who is a dramaturge, director, and artistic associate at Hartford Stage. She has numerous... That was interesting. She has numerous directing credits at various regional theaters, including Hartford Stage itself. She is an alumna of Brandeis University and the Williamstown Theater Festival of Directing. She is also a member of the Lincoln Theater Directors Lab. For more details on her many directing accomplishments, I'll direct you to the program. We also have with us to perform the play excerpt tonight, Christina Pumariega, who is an actor and writer. Her plays include her math play and Joan d'Arc, which deals with women priests in the Roman Catholic Church. Her work has been performed at various regional theaters around the United States, and her acting credits include both on-Broadway and off-Broadway performances, as well as television and film performances. She has an MFA in acting from New York University. We are delighted to have both Zoe Golub-Sass and Christina Pumariega with us this evening, and I will turn the program over to you.
Thank you. Here, I'm going to just demask. It's wonderful to join you all tonight. We're very excited to join our community partners here and to engage in art and eco-justice. And tonight we have an excerpt from a play called A Play for the Living in the Time of Extinction. And the play is written by Miranda Rose Hall and is actually currently on a tour in Europe. It's a new sustainability theater model where there are people on bikes running the lights. So the play is being performed in a variety of formats and for a variety of communities to engage with it in different ways and to spark dialogue. So tonight we have Christina Pumariega reading for us, and so we'll hear an excerpt, and then afterwards we'll chat a little bit and open up for questions, and then we'll hand it over to Ekklesia Contemporary Ballet, and then we'll chat some more. But in the meantime, here's Christina Pumariega.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Oh. How's everybody doing tonight? Oh, good. Raise your hand if you're having an okay day. Okay. Raise your hand if you're having a great day. Great. Raise your hand if you're like, my life is a searing hellscape of doom. Okay. Thank you for your honesty. So my name is Naomi, and I am the dramaturg and co-founder of Zero Omissions Theater Company. Along with my best friends and longtime collaborators, Zoe Martinez-Goldberg and Sarah Seychelles. As the dramaturg, my role in this company is to research the content of our plays and to work collaboratively to develop new material, then to deepen the conversation with an audience. Basically, I get these facts, and I wonder how facts become performance, and how performance becomes connection. But in this small company, I also function as a stage manager, assistant stage manager, script manager, props manager, light board operator, sound technician, and I drive the van. I thought, we thought that we would be presenting a play called Climate Beasties, which is billed as a kind of in-your-face, no-holds-barred, spectacular meditation on the catastrophe of climate change, as portrayed by beasties, Dr. Carbon Fever and Mrs. Connie Sumption. So we've been touring this show for the past 2 years, and this, today, was supposed to be the final show of the tour, like the whole tour, actually. However, Zoe and Sarah are not here because 36 hours ago, Zoe's mother fell. Total freak accident. She is 59. Her name is Evelyn Martinez-Goldberg, and she is currently, she is dying in the hospital. And Zoe and Sarah went to be with her, and I thought that we would just cancel all of this. But 30 minutes ago, Zoe has this panic attack, and she calls me frantically and says, Naomi, you have to go on tonight. Naomi, you have to finish the tour. Give us an ending that we're in control of. And I'm like, but I'm the dramaturg. And she's like, but you have seen the show 100 billion times. And I'm like, I cannot perform Climate Beasties alone. And she's like, then do something else. And I'm like, what? And she's like, just tell them what's happening. And I'm like, but what is happening? And Zoe says, my mother is dying. And then she hung up the phone. So now you know what's happening. And I don't exactly, I don't like travel with a one-woman show in my back pocket. I do travel with research, and I was hoping that, maybe I should start with like a little bit of background. So, we founded this theater company in college because we were in a theater class together, and we did a small project about plastic water bottles. And we were like on fire about injustice. And so our natural instinct was like, we should start a company. And so we did. And so we called it Zero Omissions because we wanted to make sure that there was nothing left out of the conversation on climate. And we spent like years developing the show. It's our only show, actually. But we have poured our blood, sweat, and tears into it. It's about the atmosphere and the ocean and materiality and greed and cars and oil, and not to give away the ending, but we start the play with like a harmless trip to the beach, and by the end, we all die. Everybody dies. We even have a parade of death and a pageant history of spectacular death, and everyone dies like 1,000 times to music with choreography in wigs. And to be honest, for most of my life, I have been like, I am the kind of person who, when she meets her enemy, is like, enemy, I will defeat you with knowledge and information. I will blind you with my radiant, research-based accomplishments. And so I feel like we took on these issues from this perspective of like triumphing through the power of spectacle and beating an audience into submission, into accepting the error of their ways, like with light cues and projections and ironic amounts of plastic. And actually, has everyone ever been on tour for a year or more with a show that they've made out of spite? Because I'm discovering that even though I thought about this work in what felt like a deep and authentic way, even though I thought my explosive imagination was exploding me into a place of depth on this one stop on our tour. So there is this part in the show, a whole scene with like witches of conservation, and there's a cauldron and a bat puppet and the whole show, and after post-show talkback, which I always facilitate, this woman raises her hand and she's like, have you ever heard of the book, The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert? And she has this whole chapter about these bats. And I say, oh, I started it, but I got busy. And she says, well, that's not surprising. It's a difficult book. I know. And so, of course, I vow to read it that night in one sitting. And so I go home and I get that book and I start rereading it, and I, a woman devoting her life, or so she thinks, to talking about this stuff, starts rereading this book about mass extinction, about the apocalypse of the golden toad and the demise of coral and the collapse of the rainforest. And at first I was like, yep, yeah, got it, okay. I mean, it was unnerving. The information was unnerving, but it didn't rock my world. I mean, it's interesting. It's a very researched book. I won the Pulitzer. I was learning some things about science history that seemed useful, and the book seemed useful. And then I got to this chapter about these bats, these little brown bats, and about how they're dying from this horrible disease. And I was, I'm gonna get personal here. I started weeping my face off, which is not typically my reaction to this kind of information. And I'm like, what is happening? Because, for the record, I don't even like bats. And especially not when they get into my house. Like, my mother and I have spent many a summer evening trying to kill those rabies babies with our tennis rackets. But then I read this chapter about these little brown bats dying from this awful disease, and for days, I was walking around consumed with these bats. And even thinking about them made me weep. Bats. But actually, I had to stop going out in public for a little while. I had to hold myself up in the privacy of my despair, because has anyone ever felt like they had to hold themselves up in the privacy of their despair because it's just too complicated to weep your face off in public? Yeah. If you haven't, you haven't lived. And I don't know what you do with that. I mean, I try to do what any reasonable dramaturg does. I research the shit out of it, and then I try to bring it into the show. So I start re-researching extinction and these bats. I'm like, hey Zoe, hey Sarah, can we talk about these bats? I feel like this is an omission, and we are zero omission. So we talk about them for a week. And I do this research about extinction, and I bring in all of these lists of species, and we try to add this conversation about extinction into our play. And they do their thing, their Zoe Sarah thing, and they make their bat extinction circus act, but it doesn't feel right, and something doesn't feel right. And I try to tell them, that's not quite right. And they're like, well, we have a puppet. And I'm like, I think it's bigger than the puppet. And they're like, but we have a parade of death. And I'm like, I'm sort of at a loss for words, which is unfortunately something that happens to me. And I wish I could have said something's changing for me. Something's different for me now. I think that maybe for all our efforts, I think we haven't actually contended in an honest way with this climate crisis. Or at least we haven't contended with it in an honest way that can adequately respond to the way I feel when I'm paralyzed by my sense of grief and catastrophe. I'm sorry. This is all sort of... I haven't really been sleeping. And when Zoe and Sarah left last night and I was all alone, has anyone ever felt suddenly, unshakably, and utterly consumed by the fear of death? I feel like I need to get back to the root. And I don't think the show we made can get me there. But I promised my friends that I would try something, so I'm going to try something. And I'm sorry if this is experimental. I think our culture is still experimenting with how to bring up death, and especially mass death. Mass interspecies death. And so I'm just going to tell you a few stories tonight about some of the things I've been thinking about and researching in private. But perhaps I can tell you some things, and you can tell me some things, and maybe we can tell a story together so that none of us has to be unbearably lonely tonight. Is that okay? Okay. Okay, well, whether or not you choose to engage with the fact that humans have caused irreversible climate change, we have, you have, I have, we are all participating, though I will note that some are participating more than others, and I'll note that those who are participating the most will be the least affected, but more on that later. So let's just set a few ground agreements for the evening. We are living on the earth. We are never outside of nature, and we are all participating. And if participating makes you feel uncomfortable, I'll say that's something we have in common. And if you say, but I didn't pay money to participate, I'll say, well, I also wish that money could protect me. So maybe let's just take one big breath in and one big breath out. Okay. Okay. Extinction. Extinction I started learning about extinction in kindergarten like everyone who's ever seen a dinosaur toy. Has anyone ever played with a dinosaur toy? Yeah. What, did yours have a name? Turnodon? Pteranodon. Am I saying that right? That's so cool. Did anyone else have a dinosaur that they named? Yeah? That's really cool. I only had one. My dinosaur's name was Jessica. I don't even know what kind of a dinosaur it was. It was a green one. And my teacher was like, these are dinosaurs, and they went extinct. And actually, that is a great opportunity to be like, okay, children, who here knows about mass extinction? Like, I feel like that's a teachable moment, and it's often overlooked. Anyway, I suppose eventually I learned that some animals were alive, and then some weren't, and I basically didn't think about extinction again until, and then maybe this is a great moment to let you know that I'm definitely not good, whatever that means, at science. I mean, I want to be the kind of person who's good at science, but at a certain point, my brain starts turning into mush, and my teachers are like, mitochondria, Kelvin, Bunsen burner, what does that yield? And I'm like, on the brink of a nervous breakdown, and they're like, mitochondria, Kelvin, Bunsen burner, what does that yield? And I'm like, is the answer searing hellscape? And so basically, this is my personal history of studying science. And somehow I find myself on this career path where I am pretending to talk about science, but mostly I'm talking about choreography. And really, oh, okay, so I have to confess to you, if I just plunge myself into the bowels of extinction without reviewing creation, I'm gonna lose it. So I think I better take a moment or two and quickly review the entire history of the Earth. Are there any scientists in the house? Oh, thank God. Okay. So this is like my ad hoc version of the creation of the Earth and its past extinctions, according to Western science, so I can get in the zone, okay? Okay, once upon a time, there was no space. Then all of a sudden, there's a lot of space, the Big Bang. And out of that space comes gas and dust, and the gas and dust become stars, and one star in particular forms a very big star, the sun. More dust and gas becomes meteors and rocks. They collide and become Earth, and the Earth is balanced, and perhaps we could say that the Earth is neither happy nor unhappy, but it is balanced. And out of the rock comes gas, and the gas cools and becomes water, and it rains. Can you believe it? It rains. Can I get some applause for rain? Yeah, thank you. And this is a major event, and the water flows all over the Earth. And so life begins to form, very small life, single cells. And the Earth basically hangs out in like this for billions of years until some bacteria form and somehow invent photosynthesis, which means that they invent oxygen, and this is a really big deal. So more things happen, and somehow single-cell organisms start to live collectively, and they start to form a co-op charter mission and turn themselves into animals, like super basic animals. They don't even hunt. They just float around in the water and let all their food come to them, jealous. But then some carbon gets up to some business in the Appalachian Mountains and causes a brief yet lethal tiny little ice age, which we call mass extinction number 1. Okay, so let's try something. Could you all just make some floaty little animal critter hands? Oh, that's great. Okay. We are critters, and let's see some ice age. All right, it's getting colder. It's getting colder. It's getting colder, and we're dead. Cool. Okay, and actually, if you and you, yeah, if you guys randomly survive, say, congratulations. So let's see, yeah, right? So let's see your critter hands again, just you two. And even though you're thousands of miles apart, You two paved the way for a new burst of life. Can I get a burst? Nice. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay, so there's a burst of life. And over millions of years, living creatures develop shells and heads and tails. And these species are alive and somehow, the continents start to move. Do you always remember that the continents moved? I always forget that the continents moved. It's sort of like I always forget that countries are a recent development. Anyway, the land of Earth is moving. And plants on land. The very first plants form. So there were not plants earlier. I can't remember if I said that there were, but if I did, that was my mistake. There are plants. When the continents move, little messy, mossy rock plants. And these plants absorb so much carbon that the temperature of the planet drops, and we plunge into an even bigger ice age, and this ice age brings with it a second mass extinction. And by the way, to get a little nerdy for a minute, we know about this stuff from the fossil record, which is incomplete, but it's basically like, wow. There are some old-ass rocks, and there is information on these rocks. There are dead plants, and animals, and minerals, and elements, and they lived near the rock, and when they died and their bodies were absorbed in the rock, and like bajillions of years later, they're the visible part on a rock. Like the evidence of life is gone. And so that's what scientists call extinction events. The evidence and then the total disappearance of life. Anyway, these trees. So after the second extinction, the first trees develop. In fact, would you mind just briefly performing the very first tree to ever have lived? You just have to do one interpretive gesture, like this, or this, or this, and actually, whatever you would like to do. Yeah. Oh, that is so beautiful. Thank you. And are there two? Great, yes, yes. And are there two other people who'd be willing to perform the very first trees? Anyone else? Yeah? Oh, lovely. Anyone else? Yes. Ladies and everyone, the very first forest. Thank you guys. That's great, you can relax your trees. Okay, so trees. And then the continent starts moving again. They form one massive continent, Pangaea, and all this movement changes the climate. It makes it very, very hot, like way too hot. Sound familiar? And volcanoes get going. Carbon dioxide explodes into the atmosphere and toxic gas. The ocean acidifies. Sound familiar? And we get the mother lode extinction, mass extinction number 3, the Permian Extinction, which we call the Great Dying. The Great Dying. 96% of all species die. Hold on, I just need to take a water break. You know, my mom once came downstairs to the kitchen when I was a little kid and found me standing in the dog's water bowl, shoving my fingers into the electrical outlet. She put an end to that one real quick, but I'm sure I can't even tell you how many times my life has been saved. Our dog's name was Geranium. And she slept on the foot of my bed every night, and I loved her with all of my soul. I loved her so much, and when I was away, the first time I went to New York, actually, I went with my aunt, and somehow geranium got into some rat poison, and when I came back, geranium was gone. And my mom told me what happened, so I knew intellectually she was dead, but I still spent a few weeks looking for her everywhere. Looking for her at the foot of my bed, looking for her by the door, looking for her by the kitchen. I couldn't find her anywhere. And I couldn't wrap my mind around it, so she was there, and then she wasn't. And I was terribly sad, but somehow I felt even worse to be so terribly confused. So anyway, the apocalypse. And afterwards, the earth is still around. Because I should point out that in all of this, the earth does not die. I don't know if we can say that that's happy or unhappy, but the earth does not die. And as elements change in the atmosphere over millions of billions of years, the earth just like gathers them into itself. Oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, because carbon is something that the earth knows how to deal with, and it deals with it slowly. It stores it, the carbon, inside of itself like a mother. It transforms the carbon until it can rest inside of itself, like a mother. And when we extract it from the earth, when we wrench it out of its mother's body, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So anyway, the apocalypse happens, and then the rain begins, and it rains and rains and it rains. It rains for almost 2 million years. That's insane. And this is where a lot of giant flora and fauna come in. And then mass extinction. Mass extinction number 4. And we're not totally sure what happened, but the basic idea, alive, dead. And then somehow, dinosaurs dominate the earth. Hey, Jessica. And then the dinos dominate the earth until an asteroid strikes the Yucatan, triggering massive tsunamis, mass extinction number 5. And Jessica dies. But after she dies, life recovers again, because life keeps recovering. New things evolve pretty quickly. We get to monkeys, and monkeys evolve into early humans, more or less, our ancestors, and we discover happiness and unhappiness. And we find it very dissatisfying. We want to eat, and we want to express ourselves. We're hunted, and we hunt. And at first, we are not great at staying alive, but we develop important skills, and we start to disperse. We migrate all over the world, and eventually we start playing our greatest known party trick, killing other species faster than they can reproduce. For large mammals, you see, it's like this. It takes a certain amount of time to prepare the body to have a baby. It takes a certain amount of time to conceive a baby. It takes a certain amount of time to give birth to the baby, let the baby grow up, teach the baby how to be, and if we kill other species before they have time to reproduce, then the species go extinct. And sometimes it happens very quickly, and sometimes it takes a very long time. But what is time? Time can be like this. The distance between two beings. So here I am, and there you are. That's time. That is time, and basically human time. And geologic time is deep time. I am here, and somehow, over 1 billion years, we arrive at one another. We can also understand time as a body. The body of a tree tells time in rings. The body of a rock tells time in lines. Millions of years can condense themselves into little lines and massive rocks, lines as thin as cigarette paper. But what is time? For humans, perhaps we know it like this, okay? Time is in our lifetime. Time is hours and seasons and phases of the moon. Time is how long a loved one is alive. For humans, there are maybe 36 generations in 1,000 years. So there's me, and there's my mother, and her 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 mother. And all of the species who kept them alive. All of the plants, the animals, the water, the air, the land, the atmosphere. Everything they saw and touched and smelled. Everything they ate and everything they walked on. All of existence when they were alive, that is 1,000 years. And to humans, that is deep time. But to the Earth, let's take that unit, 1,000 years, and then repeat it 50 times, 50,000 years. That's how long modern Homo sapiens have been walking around on this Earth. And let's compare that to the billions of years that there wasn't even oxygen on this planet. And then compress all of that into a line in a rock as thin as cigarette paper. Given that we are, in the scheme of time, so totally insignificant, let's talk about the 6th extinction. Okay. So the 6th extinction is this situation right now. It is happening now. We are living in the midst of a major mass extinction. And it's hard to comprehend. It's hard to wrap your head around the fact that in the last 50 years, in my mother's lifetime, the Earth has lost 2/3 of its wildlife. 2/3. And another way to say it, that we are experiencing a crisis of biodiversity, which is a global emergency because diversity in an ecosystem is like the indicator of health. And unlike past extinction events, this one is not caused exactly by a profound geologic force. It is the responsibility of one of the most invasive species to have ever inhabited the Earth, Homo sapiens. And as it turns out, some experts think that in the past 200 years, which is nothing. It is nothing. In the grand scheme of the Earth, it is a speck of nothing. Human activity, and in particular human industrial activity, has so transformed the land and the water and the air on our planet that we have entered new mass extinction. So profound is our manipulation of this planet that we have created a 6th mass extinction. And in our show, we kind of leave it at that. We leave it at humans bad, humans die, humans versus everyone else. And for a while, I was willing to leave it at that. But at a certain point, I mean, it is actual life we're talking about. It is actual life. And even if we are the apex species in this particular moment of the planet's history, we need to acknowledge that there is an apex within the apex, and we don't want to talk about that as a company, as a culture, as a species, because it is not all people. It is not all people, not now, not ever. There is a disproportionate participation in the general emissions, the disproportionate suffering on account of those emissions, and the people who emit and the people who suffer aren't the same people. There are gaps in race, in class, in society. And indigenous people and black people and people of color, especially the poor, are emitting the least and suffering the most. And it did not have to be like this. I mean, maybe there's never been a harmonious relationship between all humans or between humans and the world around us, but comparatively, ecologically, there was a sort of balance. But it seems like that balance it feels like things started changing globally with this world-altering concept, a hierarchy of race. When Europeans invented this system in which lighter-skinned Europeans would have dominion over the earth and darker-skinned people everywhere else would stop being people, would start being commodities, and this system, which would come to be called white supremacy, would spread all across the globe, would enmesh itself in law and religion and industry, would motivate human ecological genocide in order to accelerate all of these economies of extraction. And what is extraction? Extraction is this belief that you can take without taking care. That you can take because the earth is yours. Because you've decided that the benefits of that extraction, maybe wealth, maybe travel, maybe indoor comfort, that the benefits to some are somehow more important than the beings that they displace or drive out or extinguish. Or just look at my hometown of Baltimore, Maryland. In Baltimore, there are so many legacies of racialized violence, years of driving indigenous people off of their lands, centuries of enslaving black people, centuries of racialized inequality in jobs and housing and education and medicine and policing, centuries of limiting which city residents could wield power at City Hall and which community leaders are taken seriously and are respected as wise and innovative leaders, are given adequate resources and adequate faith to implement changes for the well-being of their communities. And on top of all of these legacies, there are also decades and decades of environmental policies about where to dump the toxic waste and where to build the chemical plants and what lead to manage and what trash to pick up and which emissions to regulate and which air qualities to monitor and what buildings to equip with adequate ventilation and adequate heat and air conditioning. So in Baltimore, what is happening? The life expectancy in the wealthiest, most white suburbs is 76 to 87. And the average life expectancy in our poorest, mostly black neighborhoods is 66 to 69. Which is to say that you can expect to live 87 in Roland Park and 66 in Park Heights, which is almost An entire generation's difference, an entire generation. And this is not by accident. This is the direct result of decision after decision that some beings, some communities, some ecosystems could be reduced to collateral damage, could be reduced to sacrifice zones. And we can't separate any of this from the rest of the story, from the story of 2/3 of wildlife disappearing because nothing on Earth is separate. Not life, not death, not crisis, not extinction, can exist in isolation. Because how we care or do not care for one another is the measure of how we care for the web of life on Earth. And that is the story of creation. Okay. I need to, where are we? We are never outside of nature. Why do I care?
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. So we're just going to take just a couple moments and just ask a couple questions, and then we'll switch over to Body and Land. But here, let's do this there. Thank you. So here. So actually, at the end of rehearsal today, we were trying to figure out exactly what line to end on, and you said that you wanted to end on a question. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about why you wanted to end. We didn't necessarily end on a direct question, but opening it up, why do we care? So that's kind of where the play ends. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about the impulse to want to end with a question in that moment of connection.
I think that the theater that's carried the greatest import for me has left me with more questions than answers. And when I read Miranda's piece, I had a lot of questions about my culpability as a consumer, and as a person trying to make heads or tails of what to do in a time that is charged with so many atrocities and where to begin to be useful. So I think the attraction to the question seemed like the right impulse right now in this moment, especially as we start to gather in spaces again in person.
And with that, I'm wondering also about the format. Like a solo play is an interesting format to engage with this material, and how, you've working in theater, film, and TV. What does a solo performance offer that's a unique match for the material?
That's such a big question. It's a great question. I think I'm figuring it out on my feet. I have actually never done a solo play in a run before. I think that I'm learning about the capabilities of what that can hold. And even reading off the page, like I have questions for you guys and you will answer in the moment and they will be what they will be. Your answers will be unique and beautiful to you, and I get to learn something in the moment. And you can tell when I listen better and when I don't. I think think that being a writer of plays and for film and TV that involves many characters, and having never written anything that was solo, now I see like all of the inherent questions and fun and opportunities in something like this. I think I am left with more questions than answers right now, walking away from that podium.
Right, and it feels like with the topic, it's so big and we don't have the answer. You know, there are some answers about ways that we can live differently and try to repair the world and try to work together. There's something that, in watching tonight with all of you, it's just being able to sit in those questions together that it allowed me to access the story in a new way. So I know we're going to shift over to Body and Land momentarily. We just wanted a couple moments to speak, but I'm wondering, Christina, if you could just share, there's one more piece. So the play goes on, and we learn more about Naomi's collaborators and Evelyn, their mother, and the play ends with a blessing. And so I'm wondering if you could read just a little bit of that blessing for us. Here I have it tabbed. Rather highlighted in here. And we go on to the blessing. Here it goes, right in here.
And I know I can't change what is happening from this stage inside of this theater, but I want to bless you anyway. I want to bless this earth and the tree on my corner and your tree and the little brown bats and eelgrass and what else? Who else? Who else on earth can we bless together?
Thank you. So it's that spirit of generosity and looking around with refreshed eyes that I think this piece can offer us. But with that, we'll hand it over to Body and Land. And here we go. Elisa, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Zoe, and thank you, Christina. That was just so powerful and moving and thought-provoking, and I can't wait to watch the whole thing. Hello, everyone. My name is Alyssa Schroth, and I'm the Artistic Director of Ekklesia Contemporary Ballet, and I'm also the choreographer of Body and Land, what you're about to see. And what we're about to present is a collaboration with our poet-in-residence, Kwamina Blankson. Kwamina, would you please stand? Our theologian-in-residence, Morley Van Yperen. A local composer, Scott Simonelli, who's not here this evening, photographer and projection mapping artist, Stephen Proctor, visual artist, John Schroth, and the 4 dancers of our company. Dancers, would you come on out? Each section of Body and Land, there's 4 sections, there's 4 seasons, and one dancer from our company represents each season. We have winter represented by Sasha Biaggiarelli. Spring is represented by Hope Blackburn. Summer is represented by Jacob Shoup. And fall is represented by Rochelle Stevenson. The work of Body and Land at this cathedral would not have been possible without the collaboration of Reverend Dean Howell and with Reverend Mary Barnett of the Church of the Holy Trinity in Middletown. We're so excited to present this work alongside the work of Hartford Stage and to see the art of dance with the art of theater together, with both having this intentionality of our work to be a response to climate change. It's really special to us. So thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to thank you all who have dreamed alongside us for this collaboration. We look forward to talking with you after we present Body and Land. And we now present Body and Land.
all things being equal. In that first season outside of Eden, did summer breezes Adam and Eve felt turn newfound freedom frigid? Warm skin was wakened to winter. Now some new beast must offer a piece of itself to give them cover, to shield and keep out the winds of this climate breathing down their necks in the cold light of winter's reality. And, perhaps, out of necessity, his hands found hers, and without words, cold skin soon burned. Continents converged, their sadness, his and hers, sublimated, submerged. Flesh and bone learned how to breathe, how to burn, igniting each breath into new flesh. We learned so little, but gleaned so much from the barren soil, soaked in snow, yet thirsty for more, for water and warmth, for slumberless seed to push, to penetrate, to impregnate the belly, the well we dug together, out of which now flows a fountain of life, the truth we can hide only for so long. When will we learn how to give birth to better things and not to worse? But truth be told, just how much blood must be spilt before the cry from the ground catches the ear of our guilt and brings new tears to old eyes? Truth be told, the cracks in a glacier keep us awake at night, while crack in dead babies leaves us complacent, light-hearted. Truth be told, we savor the fruit that melts in our mouths, enjoy the tree's juice while tasting stale blood that flows from the roots of graves grimly dug, back when telling truth got lesser men hung, or left black and blue, dangled from above, from limbs we could prove were 3/5 human, a little lower than the angels. Truth be told, we do not care because we do not know, because we do not ask, because we do not hope, because we do not care, because, and so it goes. Truth be told, with a click, we change the channel, turn the dial. In our clicks, we turn our backs on those outside. Does a cliche say enough to turn the tide? Lips unclean say next to nothing, amplified. Amplified by generation after generation of silent serenity, dressed up in duplicity, still unmoved by anything in life's long, lucidly dreamed escape from reality. Truth be told, we will not be moved by the scream we hear until we discover the scream is our own. Until then, these screams that go unheard match groans that cannot be uttered by breaking bones that burn as creation moans and mutters. Deep down, our souls soon learn to shoulder the darkest matter, the weight of wages earned by seeds unsown but scattered. So if, by chance, our hearts happen to be moved, it is only by grace, and even then, our pace is glacial, surely but slowly, at best. Our place is saved here, surely, lower than angels, no less. But are we safe here? Truth be told, we are tethered to this earth, but longing for the heavens to swallow us up in the oceans above. For the waters below are defiled, are corrupt by our own hands. We know it is we who become the pollutants that flow through the veins in the blood of this planet. This home that is less than it was when it burst forth and flowed from the mouth of a God some say died long ago. In his honor, or for ours, we give lip service for ours. These days we feign outrage well, casting aspersions and spells. We choke on the very same words a God once spat into our eyes. We clutch at the very same pearls that we once cast to dogs and swine. Having these treasures in earthen vessels, we drink the dregs of what our God left us. Though our mouths open wide, still our hearts close too tight for the water of life to first bubble, then rise. Truth be told, we should know we are the bottom feeders, blinded by specks and beams, some wooden, some light, but neither illuminate the evil in eyes that see only faults in the earth, not in ourselves. Snow falls out of season, just until hell freezes over us all. Heaven lies beneath us, all things being equal. But no, we are not. Truth be told, hope is fleeting, so are we, since no one sees the oceans creeping forward toward our sand-still castles, made with playthings lent from heaven. Truth be told, creation grieves, and we should, well, all things being equal.
Now we're going to ask you some questions. The first one is our favorite question, just to ask you all what you noticed. I can't see anybody. Nope. Can anybody have anything that you noticed in the dance, in the movements, anything that stuck out to you? Hey, dancers. You can come out. Do you have anything that sticks out to you in your dancing?
This rookie moment we were just talking about, this final moment is really uncomfortable for us, to be honest with you, because you're here and you're sweating and you're like, I'm trying to emote into the universe for like a minute. But we were just talking. What was the quote you said?
I heard something like literally just 2 days ago that said good art is supposed to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. So ever since hearing that, I thought of that moment and I was like, ooh, I'm just gonna like bathe in this blue light, bathe in this tension, bathe in this awkward silence, and just see what happens from it.
Yes, especially because we've talked a lot about breath. I love that you mentioned it earlier, this concept of breath too. And for us, we're like inhaling, exhaling in this moment. But I have a chance at the end to it's kind of dark in this audience, but to try and make eye contact with as many people as possible. And it's always a moment for me of I'm impacted, as well as there's a moment of honesty in that, because some people might be distracted, some people are really invested, and whatever it is, I'm seeing emotions. And for us, it's this exhale, at least for me, of we've talked about the balls in your court, because the balls in each of our courts, but especially as the seasons, the earth is dependent on us. And so as uncomfortable as this moment is, realizing that it's an intentional discomfort within, because it should make us uncomfortable, and realize this is a discomforting thing that's going on and we need to do something about it.
How did that moment make everybody else feel? These seats are for you guys.
Yeah, they're for you.
How did that moment, that final moment where there's so much time and there's, how'd that make, yeah, Kwamina.
I absolutely loved it, because with all the perspective that we gained from the one-person piece, talking about what time really, describing what time really means, not in human terms, but just in the grand scale, it wasn't asking much of us to ask us to just sit in the uncomfortable but meaningful silence. And there was a part of me that was hoping they would never move and that we just have to deal with it, because it was doing me good in a way that I can't articulate, but I knew that I needed to not just move on to the next thing. So thank you guys for doing that.
Anybody else?
Go ahead.
Okay. Ooh. I felt in that moment I wanted to talk about something I noticed, that there was another moment when I felt a season kind of looking around, and in fall with the lightning, when Ricky was kind of just moving around and kind of looking both at us and around, and I don't know, I think it really, I was thinking a lot about gaze and noticing when the seasons were relating to each other and to the space, and what kind of questions that was asking.
That's neat that you mentioned that. I think of when we do fall, what I think of a lot of is you brought up the aspect that Ricky's kind of like moving about the seasons. She does that in the beginning, and then also at the end, kind of when we're all kind of just rocking back and forth and she's dancing, and then she comes and she touches every one of us. I think of Ricky in that dance as sort of like a mother figure who's just like looking at her children. And I'm not a mother, so I can't say this from experience, but I can imagine if you're a mother and you have children and you see that they're hurt or struggling or in pain, like you want to comfort them and you want to like fix the problem for them, but you know that you can't. And so it's this place of like empathy that's so deep and this sort of stuckness that you can't really do anything. And that's just I think a lot of us probably feel that way towards the climate crisis. Like we want to do something about it, but we feel so small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And so it's just an interesting phenomenon.
That really, when you were mentioning that, one of the main things that stuck out to me in the play was thinking about the earth as a mother taking in that carbon, and the language that you gave with the monologue. It was just amazing because as I was watching this dance, which I've seen thousands of times, working on it for 3 years, but so many other points of language came through for me and like really stood out in deeper and more meaningful ways.
Yeah, the season seemed more ancient tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, they did.
So I have a question for all of you, but also, for all of us that were here and did this tonight, that someone just asked me recently, what is the difference between theater and dance? What do they do? Do they do different things, or do they do the same thing in different ways? I don't even know how to phrase the question, but I'm really interested to hear what people have to say after participating in both.
I know very little about dance at all, and I'm always mystified, and it's every time I watch a dance piece, regardless of genre, I always feel like someone's knocked the wind out of me in an incredible way. And I think that with theater, for me, I worked as an actor for about 10 years before I started writing plays, so it was a very conscious decision to start writing. And it's amazing what not projecting language onto a moment and just taking in a body and space and allowing it to work on you, all of your associations that you have in your head, like hashtag every little category that you can think to drum up from all of the well of your experience, from everything you can remember, all of your memories. It was such an incredible kind of toggle between watching you all move together and then having the language to support it. And the language was so beautiful, and you delivered it with such, like, it was so perfect in like the way that you offered us the questions and also repeated the questions. And I think that repetition, both in seeing these vignettes of repetition through time, through seasons, but also like the smaller moments of repetition as you all communicated with one another, and you'd see a movement mirrored and mirrored and mirrored and extrapolated, and then we're left with the language of conscious understanding. And that's me trying to sum it up neatly, but I can't. It's still working on me in a beautiful, never-ending way. So I'm excited to experience how I'll feel about it in a few hours from now, and then tomorrow, and then the next week, because I know I will. So full.
In relation to what Christina just said, but Zoe, when she mentioned the gaze, I felt like theater and dance were almost the same thing for me, because when you broke the fourth wall, when you guys do that, it pulls us in, or pulls me in a way where I can't be a fly on the wall that you don't notice, but now you're looking at me, and I'm not up there dancing, but I'm part of whatever's happening. And then when you were looking at us and even before you invited us to engage with you as an actress, I had whispered to my daughter, I said, you know she's acting, right? And Jojo was like, no. It was like, and I think that just brought it to life because we were part of what was happening. And we were part of the dialogue, we're part of the emotions. We could feel what you were feeling sometimes because you were feeling them not just in our presence, but at us. And I felt invited to feel all those things and to feel the weight of time and to feel the sadness of someone who I don't know, but is afraid of losing their mother. I mean, just so many pieces that made us raw for then when the dance came along. It's like the first night again, where I just felt like I'm unprepared to manage all the emotions that you made me feel right now. So thank you, I guess.
I really loved in your work how you incorporated movement in the audience. I just loved that because a lot of times we're often asked the question, how can we involve the audience more to move with us, you know, as non-dancers or non-movers? And that was just brilliant. And I just felt like you brought us in and just in these little glimpses of movement and gestures, we felt a part of your story. And thank you for that. And I thought it was really engaging. And I don't know, I just want to explore more with that.
I have to credit both Zoe in allowing me the room to rehearse and play it and understand that it was going to be any which way, but also if you could look down the page, if the audience gives you nothing, she's like, okay, this is the way. And if the audience gives you something, anything, like, go with God, this is the way. And it could be anything in between. And so that, I wonder also what happens when things don't turn out the way that you choreograph them. And I imagine something, a little something maybe, or maybe a bigger something happens in that vein every time you perform together. Yeah, that improvisational, well, the experiment, like that part of it seems to be a part of every time you get up in front of people and gather.
I'll also say I found myself moving in my seat with the music and then with the poetry and finding the rhythms all together. So I will say that you guys also invited us to move in a way that I didn't even realize. I was like, oh, I'm moving. And I was, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for giving us such an opportunity to ponder, to dwell in such profound questions and topic. I felt that I was sitting as a good Episcopalian, sitting all the way in the back, and I was just taking it all in and feeling the profoundness of what you're helping us to think about. I feel that Body and Land is an invitation. The expression of art, the opportunity to see that intersection of spirituality and the arts, which is part of our vocation as a cathedral, but spirituality is not only in relation to the Christian faith, it's part of our connection with the Creator, our connection with the universe, with a bigger picture. And I think that what you have done together, reading from Extinction and connecting it with the dance, to me, brought us to a deeper place of discernment. Thank you. Thank you. Please join me in thanking our artists today. Thank you so much. Zoe, Christina, thank you so much. Elisa, thank you, dancers. Thank you, our theologian in residence. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Hartford Stage, for gifting us this evening. And those of you who are watching online, we welcome you tomorrow. Tomorrow we're having Cuatro Puntos. They're our ensemble in residence here at Christ Church Cathedral, and there will be more dialogue and conversation about creation care and eco-justice. Have a wonderful evening, and we hope that you are here with us every evening at 7 p.m. to continue the journey of Body and Land. Thank you. Good evening.